Salah, Mane, Firmino are all 29 years of age. It's unthinkable that you could give all of them new contracts.
Well, many of you would have seen the piece published on The Athletic on Monday morning about Jordan Henderson's contract situation. If you haven't, you can go and check it out now. It obviously caused a huge amount of debate, and I suspect that debate will continue. I'm delighted to be joined by James Pearce, who I wrote that story with, and also our German football expert, Raphael Honigstein. Starting with you, James, can you sum up what is going on here with Jordan Henderson and Liverpool?
Yeah, hi. It's certainly a very interesting, complicated, and I think probably sensitive situation at the moment because Jordan Henderson has entered the final 2 years of his contract, and it's probably of all the contract situations at Liverpool, probably until we wrote that story, it probably been spoken about the least. But there is definitely an issue there. We know that there's been no real progress at all in talks that started at the back end of last season. Clearly, what's on the table from the club to Henderson at the moment is not an attractive proposition. The outcome of that is that his future does look uncertain. And we know that PSG and Atletico are keeping a close eye on development. There are parallels with what happened with Gini Wijnaldum, of course, who Liverpool were reluctant to give a big, long, lucrative, expensive extension to a player beyond the age of 30, and he ended up leaving. So intriguing to see how this one works itself out.
Yeah, I think it's worth pointing out that these talks have been going on for quite some time, really. Earlier in the summer, towards the end of last season, for weeks and weeks, as it was described to us. And it's hit a bit of an impasse. As you mentioned there, we don't think it's over money. We also don't think there's some kind of acrimonious dispute here. I think it's important to stress that we're not trying to whip anything up here. There seems to be quite a diverse reaction to the stories that we've been reporting on. We're reporting accurately and in good faith. And we're sourcing these things incredibly deeply to explain live situations. And therefore, we do have to consider the fact that Jordan Henderson may leave. Again, not guaranteed. And so I want to pass this on to Raf, because as I understand it, there is credible interest, admiration from Paris Saint-Germain and their manager, Mauricio Pochettino. There may be situations that develop if certain circumstances fit into place with, say, an Atletico Madrid. He's incredibly close friends with Luis Suarez. And then there are other teams on the continent who perhaps do look for older, more experienced players to help get them over the line and win multiple trophies. And so I just wanted to get your European view, Raf, on what the market is looking like for somebody like Jordan Henderson, or is there not one in your view?
I think there's a market. Of course, the market right now is pretty bad anyway for players, but there will always be a market for somebody who comes with so many extra things that perhaps are slightly less easy to quantify when it comes to the stats. We talked about the glue factor. We talked about the personality, the voice in the dressing room, all those things, especially if you're a club that is still struggling with its sort of startup vibe of having a lot of players who perhaps are there with a view of being somebody else, somewhere else eventually, then to have someone who can really represent and be like the coach's long arm on the pitch is of tremendous value. And I'm not surprised that PSG are in the front line of this conversation, because it's clear that they see this summer as an opportunity to do a lot of deals that nobody else can do, or very few other clubs can do, with a view of winning the Champions League now.
If you're not an Athletic subscriber, you can currently join for 30% off the price of annual subscription. That's less than £1 or $1 per week. Just go to theathletic.com/Ornstein to sign up and enjoy all of our comprehensive football and US sports coverage catered to your teams. Now, before we get back to James and Raf, a question for you guys. Who is Liverpool's most important player? Let me know in the comments below. So, Raf, tell us what Jurgen Klopp will be feeling about this situation, because James and I reported that if he had got his way, not only would Wijnaldum have still been at Liverpool, but Jordan Henderson would get a new contract as well. And it's looking possible, not definite, that both men will not be at Liverpool in the not too distant future.
I think the first thing to say is that this is a new problem for Jurgen Klopp, because where he was before, players didn't get old with him. It's not because he ran into the ground and they had to leave very quickly, but because the club was never in a position to keep these players beyond a certain age. If they were good enough, then they would be snapped up by other clubs. I have no doubt that Jurgen would have loved to keep Gini. He's on the record many times saying how much he loves the player. I think it's a relationship that goes beyond the player and manager relationship. But Klopp has, at least as far as the public-facing side of his work is concerned, has also shown himself as a company man who will not go against the wishes of his owners, who will not agitate, at least publicly, and who will not do what Benitez has done, for example, which is to become very political and make it part of the us against them sort of dynamic by talking about these players in a way that can be seen as incendiary. So I don't think that would change. I think this might not directly answer your question, David, but I think he's become both more and less sentimental in his last few years. More in the sense that I think his emotional relationship with the players has actually become stronger, even stronger than it used to be, but also less sentimental in the sense that I think he finds it maybe easier to switch off from those emotions and still see the business side and still see that these are footballing decisions that sometimes have to be made. And there is no indication from everything I've seen and been told over the last few months that Klopp is surprised by what's going on. I think he understands the situation. He understands that it comes with some decisions that will be very painful. But it doesn't seem to have, as far as I know, as far as I've been told, doesn't seem to have put him in a mindset where he is somehow upset or annoyed with the situation he finds himself in. I think he's become quite acceptant of it and is determined to make the most of it.
One of the things that Raf started with there was growing old together. James, there is a priority list at Liverpool. There are a number of players whose contracts are up on the horizon. And let's take a quick look at that, because it indicates that Jordan Henderson, with all due respect, is probably not right at the top of that list at this moment in time, or is that unfair?
No, I think that's completely fair. That's the kind of the harsh reality, if you like. I think for Liverpool, for Mike Gordon and Michael Edwards, when they're looking at it at the moment, they're assessing, well, who have we got here who we know in 3, 4, potentially 5 years' time will still be, we believe, absolutely integral to this club's hopes of success. And I think that's why, not surprisingly, Alisson Becker is at the front of that queue at the moment. We're expecting that contract extension to get finalised in the coming weeks. The same with Fabinho. He won't be far behind, and Fabinho's 27, just coming into his prime probably. And then Virgil van Dijk, you've got Trent Alexander-Arnold, Andy Robertson. These are the types of players. Mohamed Salah, of course. Liverpool absolutely desperate to get him tied down. So yeah, that's the kind of the real priorities for the club at the minute. But that does present dilemmas, because they've also got a lot of players who have entered the last 2 years of their deals at the moment, and it's getting that balance right, isn't it? Between you just can't allow too many of those players to become old together and end up with take the front line as the perfect example. Salah, Mane, Firmino are all 29 years of age. It's unthinkable that you could give all of them new contracts and reach a point where they're all 33, 34, all past their best, not able to light up European football as they have done for so long, and you're lumbered with 3 massive salaries that have become a burden on the club.
Well, James, I'll put you on the spot here, because you're immersed in Merseyside in Liverpool, and you will have seen a lot of the reaction towards the ownership, which has sort of indicated this is yet another dent to the chemistry between FSG and the fan base. But at the same time, they don't tend to act with sentimentality. If we've seen past examples with Steven Gerrard, Gini Wijnaldum, where do you think this will end up going from here?
Yeah, well, I still get the feeling that this is near the start of the process and not the end. I think I'm sure there will be more dialogue. I think it will just hinge ultimately, and I'm not privy to these details, exactly just how far off there, how much of a gulf there is between where FSG are willing to go on this and what Henderson is willing to accept. I think that's the big unknown at the moment. I mean, it's absolutely unthinkable that he would go anywhere this summer. I don't see that. There's been some noise, I know, in the last 24 hours on the back of our story that something could potentially happen in this window. I would be absolutely amazed if that was the case. But we're talking about further down the line. And it's intriguing because, of course, for so long, everyone assumed that the Wijnaldum situation would get sorted. The argument was 12, 18 months ago, well, there's no way they're going to let go a guy who plays every single week. He's Klopp's go-to man, ridiculously versatile, ridiculously resilient. But look, look at what happened. And I think that shows that, there is a bit of a line drawn in the sand, that they have decided we are not going to commit massive sums of money to players who are past their peak.
And what you explained there is why this is such a critical time, because neither of the parties in this equation, Liverpool nor Jordan Henderson, want this going down to 2023. They want something being sorted out now to avoid a Wijnaldum repeat. So we better watch this closely. I'm going to finish with a question for both of you. James, try and lift the tempo, the tone a little bit. What might Liverpool be doing in the transfer market? Because that's a question that many fans are now asking off the back of our story.
Yeah, well, I think that the positive news in the last 24 hours has been the outgoings, which has been a real hard slog for Liverpool so far, is now well and truly underway. Marco Grujic is on the brink of completing a £10.5 million move to Porto, and Teo Awonwi is on his way to Union Berlin for $6.5 million. So that's that pot, which we when we reported on the signing of Ibrahima Konate, we said then that further incomings were going to be heavily reliant on what kind of money could be generated from sales. And I think so now, I think that will generate excitement. The fact that, that pot is probably, certainly gone past the £20 million mark in terms of sales. And that will keep growing because, Harry Wilson will go. They're expecting offers for Nat Phillips, potentially Nico Williams, Shaqiri is another one. So yeah, clearly the big priority for Liverpool between now and the end of the window is bringing in another centre midfielder. They haven't replaced Wijnaldum yet. Yes, they've got an exciting young talent coming through in Curtis Jones, but I think clearly that centre midfield position is the one that everyone's got their eyes on at the moment. And I think once some more funds is freed up from the outgoings, then we'll see Liverpool active in the market once again. And
finally to you, Raf. How is this looking for Jurgen Klopp? Is it summer where he's rejuvenated and can go again with excitement after the relative disappointment of last season? If they can bring in some new recruits, as James talks about there, is he ready to plough on with this project? James writes about him potentially taking a sabbatical in 2024. So is he going to throw everything at this, a full pre-season, bit of positivity around the camp? How do you read that situation and everything that's going on in his head right now?
The sense I've got is that he's really up for going again, even though it comes with difficulties. I mean, Klopp has often been best when he talks himself into the sort of slightly underdog mentality and, things are against us and we don't have as much money and there are bigger forces out there. I mean, it's always been the story for him at every single place. It looked as if the dynamic might shift with Liverpool, but it hasn't really. He's back to where he was in a way. But I don't think he minds it that much. I think he actually finds that this is probably puts him in a position where he needs to maximize the resources even more and might push him and his players to try even harder. And that's not a bad place to start beginning of the season.